guys. Welcome to Pub Theology number... I've lost count of how many of these we've had. But welcome to Pub Theology. We got an awesome speaker tonight to talk for you all here, who I'll introduce in just a minute. But first, I'd like to just do a shout out to Benny's Bistro and also to George, who lets us host this place at Dicey Riley's here, which is an awesome place. So thanks for that, Dicey. Thanks for that, George. Tonight we've got a speaker who we managed to bring in. So just to give you a bit of background on him. So from 1999 to 2004, he studied philosophy and theology under the Dominicans, the Dominican friars, and throughout that managed to get his Bachelor of Arts in theology and also a certificate in youth ministry and in clinical and pastoral education. But from then went on to do fine arts at the Sydney National Arts School, which is pretty awesome, and got commissioned to do the mosaic that currently sits in the courtyard at the University of Notre Dame, where he started teaching in 2010, teaching in the School of Philosophy and Theology in Logos. So he's here now to talk to us about experiencing God in beauty. And so without further ado, here we go.
Thank you. Thanks for that warm introduction. I don't know where you get all those bio notes from, but the internet's good for many things these days, and it's a great pleasure for me to actually come down here and talk to you guys. Even though I work in Sydney, I choose to live in the Blue Mountains, and I'm originally from Adelaide. So they tell me that people from Adelaide find themselves quite at home here, and even newly ordained priests have told me that people from the Blue Mountains find themselves at home here. So I assume that I will find myself at home here amongst you guys who live in an area of great natural beauty. And I think that's important because I'm going to be talking to you about the experience of beauty and how we experience God through beauty. Now, it sounds cliche, but I am going to do it. I'm going to get a little bit philosophical. Okay, so those of you who are used to studying science and other things might be a little bit uncomfortable. I'm going to say that some things, not too deep, but a little bit abstract. So I'm going to have to sort of, ask you to sort of step outside of your comfort zone. But when I am speaking about those things, I'm actually going to be speaking about very simple things, about the nature of reality itself and how that pertains to truth, goodness, beauty. How that pertains to that greater reality which sustains all other realities, ultimately God. So, God and beauty. Well, also by way of introduction, I hope that by the end of this talk, you will have something to take home to be able to think about, churn over in your heads. When you listen to a piece of music, look at a sunset, see a child smile, you'll think, wow, there really is something of God behind that, in that, under that, sustaining that. Ultimately, I'd love it if you walked away from here going, oh, wow, this is awesome. It's changed my relationship with God forever. And that probably won't be the case. But, you're here not just to listen to me, stand here with a microphone and crap on and things, but you're here to do other really valuable, truly good things. Have a nice meal. Mingle with people. Enjoy the fire. Look at the awesome thing, that fire. It's cold, it's windy outside. Here we are inside a building where there's these man-made bricks in an arrangement in which there is wood being consumed in such a way that it lets out light and heat. And if you go and look at it and you see something beautiful, you feel something beautiful. There's something amazing about our world in that. And this is what we want to do. We want to wonder at the world. Ponder the world. Often, though, when it comes to talking about beautiful things, we often imagine, and some of our spiritual tradition does this as well, imagine some competition with God. There are delightable things in this world which we rightly call idolatrous, that lead us away from God. I don't want to focus on that tonight. What I want to focus on is what of God is actually behind the delightable. The fact that you can delight in things that are beautiful shows us something of the essence of what we really truly desire, what we really truly hunger for. You know, the ultimate end of our gluttony, our ultimate end of our lusts, of our passions, isn't those things that are going to pass us by in this life, aren't those frail things that aren't going to ultimately satisfy us. But the ultimate end, what we really desire in our lusts, in our passions, in our hunger for food, wine, sleep even, is God. But I want to start off by just, I will try and make this a bit interactive. If anyone's got a question, feel free to put your hand up. Okay. Well, I wouldn't mind asking you guys a few questions, if that's all right. I'm not very good with microphones. If I put the microphone away, can you guys at the back hear me all right? If you don't, just let me know. I just want to ask you guys, what things do you experience as beauty? You know, what do you experience as beautiful? What do you truly find beautiful? You know, if I was to ask you that, what do you find beautiful? Sorry, what's her name? Katrina. Yeah. Maybe the microphone. Katrina for a minute. Katrina, what do you find beautiful?
A newborn baby.
A newborn baby. Now,
Yeah.
Would this happen to you and your own kids?
No, but one of my close friends had a baby girl about 7 weeks ago.
Yeah, right.
And I got to see the baby just after she was born.
You know, who here doesn't like a newborn baby? Like, you'd be a pretty cool monster if you did. Now, there is something gross about babies. They vomit and all that sort of stuff, and and when they're born, they're like wriggled up little things. All right, but there is something lovely about a newborn baby, or not even a newborn one, but one that's a couple of years old. You know, you're in the shopping centre and you see a kid who's like in the little cart thing and they're happy. You find beauty in that. You take delight in that. They might be a complete random stranger. You might never see them again. But yet, you can still recognise beauty in that. You know, there's some disinterested quality. Oh, what do you find beautiful?
Well, I was going to say the same thing, babies, but I also like hiking and camping and being out in nature.
Okay. Hiking, camping, being out in nature. Those are things. Oh, it's recording. Oh, so I've got to talk into it. Oh. Camping, nature, beauty. You know, these are things that all of us are more or less able to experience. We might not like camping because we might get blisters on our feet or don't like sleeping in the dirt, but that doesn't mean that you can't love the idea of the scenery. Is there anybody here who wouldn't go look at the cliffs, up this... Where are the nice famous cliffs up from here somewhere? Scarborough, is it? The escarpment. You know, who thinks the escarpment is ugly? Thanks, Spence. Yeah, right. Okay. Who here has ever experienced an ugly sunset? You know, there's more or less beautiful sunsets, but there's no such thing as an ugly sunset. Spence, what do you love? What do you find beautiful?
I don't really know. That's a bit weird. Different question.
Come on, there must be something in this world that you find beautiful. Yeah.
Not Marty Pennell. Not him.
I'll tell you something that I find beautiful. Spencer's grandmother. She's beautiful. You've got... Go on.
Acts of compassion, kindness, mercy in people that just surprise you.
Yeah, okay. Interesting, everyone heard that, but interesting you threw on then that surprise you. You know, they're acts of mercy, acts of compassion. You know, these things show the beauty of the human character. But they're even more beautiful when they seem out of the blue. You know, that's when they seem all the more heroic, when they're surprising. So these are some of the things that we find beautiful. Now, none of you said a famous... None of you guys that I asked said a famous movie star. But yet, I'm sure that many of us here would find certain famous movie stars physically beautiful. We'll come back to that one later. But a few things, I just better clarify some terms once we start talking, because I'm talking about this within the context of God. All right, we're talking about God and beauty. God and the experience of beauty. What do I mean by God? Well, of course, there's the God of our faith, the God of the Bible, the He who is, that which just is. Okay? That's what I mean by God. This is also correlated by that philosophical idea of that underlining principle which governs all change, sustains the universe, the God of philosophy. The God of philosophy, the prime mover, okay, easily correlates with that which he who is of the Bible, the Tetragrammaton, the Yahweh, okay? That necessary being that holds everything in existence. This will be important. And then there's the term beauty. You know, what do we mean when we say something is beauty? Well, the definition of beauty that I'm going to work with is the one that's a paraphrasing of something said by St. Thomas Aquinas. Id quod visium placet. So what that translates to, that's Latin, of course, that which visium, when seen, placet, pleases. So that which on seeing pleases. Now, seeing in this sense doesn't just mean the visual seeing of the eyes, but that, what word did I put up there? Perceiving. Okay? And by pleasing, or placet, we mean something deeper than just, oh, that's pleasant. By beauty, we're talking about that which, when perceived, gives delight. You perceive the small child. You see it in its innocence and its goodness, and it gives you delight. All right? Or you see the wonderful cliffs and the trees and they're overhanging and the way the light shines through them and the stream, and it gives you a certain delight. Now, that delight is often what some of the more recent philosophers of aesthetics call disinterest. And I've just got some other terms up there which I'm not really going to bother about too much, but when we start talking about beauty in philosophical language, we're doing a field of philosophy called aesthetics. And even though many of the ancient philosophers talked about beauty, it's only recent philosophers since Immanuel Kant that have really have had this separate field of philosophy called aesthetics. Immanuel Kant pointed out, and I'm not the hugest Kant fan, but he made some valid points. He pointed out that often things that we find beautiful have no real alternative interest for us. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not interested in them, because we are interested in them. We find them fascinating. Music we want to listen to, we want to look at. But it affords us no ulterior satisfaction apart from the taking pleasure in it. All right? So you think of food. All right, got lovely food coming in and out of the kitchen here. Okay? What do we enjoy about the food? Who's had a meal tonight? What did you have? Tell us. What did you have? And what you enjoyed about it?
I had the burger.
You had the burger. What was great about the burger?
The meat.
The meat. Would have the meat satisfied you as much without the other things piled around it? Probably. Would have the meat satisfied you as much had it just been pureed and sort of freeze-dried and not cooked the way it was? No. In fact, was the meat in a patty, or did it just come in like a slab and then was cooked up? It was in a patty, and presumably they would have chucked spices in, done things to the patty to make the patty nice. Now, this is funny. You take pleasure in the burger, all right? But is the burger really that good for you? Who here likes raw broccoli? Just eat it straight out of the garden. Who here prefers their broccoli with cheese sauce? Steamed, softened, bit of salt, something added to it. All right. Who here likes raw kale? Just crunch, crunch, crunch. Anybody? Who likes kale at all? At least put a bit of lemon juice on it. Come on. All right. Who likes cake? Who prefers raw broccoli than cake? Oh. This is the thing, is what's actually really good for us, what's actually good for our animal needs, is not what we take pleasure in. Who likes cake more when it's made by their grandmother than when it's from the shop? Now, you objectively might not like the cake as much. The flavours might not be as good. The layers mightn't be as good. The textures might be as good when your grandma makes it. But there's more of a pleasure in your grandma making a cake than you. These things have a real value to them, and yet they're an expression of human creativity. Even your burger patty is an expression of human creativity. You know, it's a disinterested like in the sense that it's not actually healthier for our bodies or better for us. Everybody likes music. Thanks for playing earlier, that was great. Okay. What does music do for us? Music doesn't keep you warm at night, even if you're a poor musician trying to make money from it. Music doesn't put a roof over your head. Music doesn't put food in your stomach. Yet, we take delight in music. Beauty itself seems to have no function in our world. Yet, it plays a massive part in our lives. We choose the meals we want because we take a certain delight in what we're going to be eating. We choose the clothes that we wear because we not for pure functionalism. None of you are dressed purely functionally, but because it portrays some inner quality of ourselves, because we're comfortable wearing it. It has some harmony with our being, we might say. Now, you might have heard it said beauty isn't beauty in the eye of the beholder. And this is a big dilemma when it comes to talking about beauty. We notice that we all take delight in different things. We all seem to find some things more beautiful than others, and they might be different than the person sitting next to us. What's your favourite type of music?
A Mahler symphony.
And a Mahler symphony. Is there a flute in that?
Between 4 and 6.
Between 4 and 6 flutes in the Mahler symphony. Anybody else here into flute concertos or symphonies that contain flutes? No? What's your favourite type of music?
Celtic music.
Celtic music. Have you got an Irish background? That's nice. Were you exposed to that when you were young, or what's a... No? You just found some sort of resonation with Celtic music? Okay. These two people both have good taste in music, have both perceived different things that they find beautiful. Okay. Yet, and then some will say, well, therefore, beauty is purely subjective. It's purely about what you like, about what you find lovely, what you find beautiful. Would you play your music to each other? Yeah. You know, if we find something beautiful, though, we have a desire to share it with others. Okay. So beauty itself cannot be purely subjective. You know, if you say you're in love with somebody and you see a wonderful sunset and that person that you're in love with is nowhere around, you feel a loss in that you cannot share the beauty that exists with that other person. Beauty by its nature, by our experience of nature, calls us to want to share. Beauty itself is something to be shared. You know, who likes cooking here? When do you... I picked on you before. What do you like to cook?
Cupcakes.
Cupcakes. Then what do you do with the cupcakes?
I take them to work and force them on my colleagues.
Take them to work and force them on your colleagues. You know, that's a lovely thing in itself. Okay, and I hope they enjoy it. But you would feel hollow and shallow if you just made cupcakes for yourself. You know, those of us that really love cooking ultimately love to cook for others. Okay. An artist, be it a poet, musician, painter, when an artist paints, when a poet writes a poem, when a songwriter writes a song, they write it to share the beauty that they perceive with others. The painter of the beautiful painting, experiences beauty in his own eye, but then wants to translate what he sees in his own eye and put it in somebody else's eye. All right? Just like you wanting to put your cake in somebody else's mouth. The poet, and you know, poetry, music, so abstract. Whole string of words, and yet it can be about love, it can be about death, it can be about tragedy, it can be about a storm, it can be about all sorts of different things. A poem about a storm is not a storm. It's a poem about a storm. A poem about death is not death. It's a poem about death. And that can have a melancholic beauty about it. As an abstraction of what the artist sees and feels, though, it is ultimately written so that somebody else can see and feel what they're communicating. So beauty of its nature is something to be communicated. Now, this is interesting when we start to really consider what beauty is. Yeah, it's that thing that when perceived gives delight. A delight that, you know, isn't concerned necessarily with our creature comforts, like seeing that random kid smiling and happy, like seeing that sunset. The sun does more for you, not when it's setting, but when it's bright and in the day. You know, the cake is less good for you than the raw broccoli. But yet, there is something real that we call beauty. It is something, experiencing delight is something very real. It is so real that we're more inclined to do something special with our food than to eat it raw. It is so real that we're inclined to buy people flowers, to buy music, to play music to our friends. The really important things that we do in life are actually about sharing beauty. Not just about creature comforts or materialism. So let's have a look at some ancient sources. Okay? Of course, I'll mention the Bible. We'll start with the Bible. Okay? You've got the Old Testament, and it does talk about beauty. It often talks about beauty, extols beauty in creation, but within the context of the Creator. And you find lovely phrases in the Psalms, lovely bits of poetry, like, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims the work of his hands. Day unto day conveys the message, and night unto night imparts the knowledge. No speech, no word, no voice goes forth unheeded. Their sound goes forth through all the earth, their message to the utmost bounds of the world. You know, a bit of poetry within the Psalms speaks about the moving, swarming cosmos and sees that in relation to proclaiming the goodness of God. Okay. Anyone here studied any philosophy? I promised I'd get a bit philosophical. Plato, you heard of Plato? Tell us something about the forms. First year. Can you tell us something about Plato and the forms? Do you know anything about Plato and the forms?
Forms are like the metaphysical, explanation to matter. So form is one part of matter. So, for example, the plant over there has a form, and its form is kind of like it's not tangible. You can't see it. But it's got some kind of soul, per se.
Okay, that's good. That's a good little summary. Okay, we notice that in our world we have the realities of various things. Okay, and I'll use the example of red. Okay. Mary here's got a red jumper on. Okay. It contains the colour red. And this nice St. George, is it? St. George Illawarra jumper there is also red. There's also red on this box thing up here. There's a book with a red cover. And there's a red baby chair over here. Now, Plato would say all of these things contain the form of redness. Okay? But none of these things are red per se. Now, is that wool? This jumper of Mary's was once a grey colour, and then someone bleached it and washed it and it became white. Then they dyed it red. And this is presumably that was probably once plastic bags or something. Okay, that came from a sheep, that came from plastic bags. That box is sort of wood, and then somebody applied some oil-based product with pigmentation in it that reflects light in the same way that your jumper and that baby chair reflect light back to our eyes. Now, Plato would say that all of these things contain, at the present, redness. They all have the form of the idea of red, which comes from the real ideal redness, which must exist apart from the jumper, the other jumper, the baby chair, the book, or the box. Okay? The fact that these things all contain redness, but none of them is red per se. In fact, one stage, none of them were red, and at some stage in the future, they probably won't be red again. In fact, I can take either of those jumpers and I can wash them and wash them and wash them and wash the red right out. Use bleach maybe. Or I could dye it black. I could dye it something else. So they themselves are not of the nature of redness. Therefore, there must be this ideal redness apart from any physical thing. Now, that was Plato's idea. Now, that what we're talking about is the form of redness. And you said like the soul. I'll get to the soul in a minute. But imagine something else, okay? That's redness. Imagine chairs, okay? We've got a chair here, got a baby chair over there, got an armchair over here. They're all very different, okay? But they all have chairness about them. Now, the wood that this is made out of, because you mentioned the matter, okay? It's the form's there, but it's executed in matter. The matter that makes up this chair, okay, is bits of wood, bits of nails, bit of vinyl, and a bit of fluff under the vinyl. At one stage, these things weren't part of a chair, and I can take an axe to it and throw it in the fire, and this material substance can turn into gas and ash. All right? So it doesn't own, the matter doesn't own chairness. In fact, there are many different chairs which all share in this chairness. The matter of the jumper and that chair over there and the box doesn't own redness. In fact, there are many different things that share in redness, and none of these are red per se. The redness can be taken away from them. So where is real redness? Where is real chairness? It's in these ideal forms, is what Plato would say. Likewise, for, say, catness or dogness. Likewise, for some abstract concepts like niceness and goodness. Okay? But also, Plato would say humanness. And that's where you said, like, the soul, you know. The soul of the chair is the form of chairness. Now, there's not an immortal chairness in the chair, you know. But human beings, the form of the human being, the form of the body, your Eunice, what was your name, sorry?
Victoria.
Victoria, okay. We would say Victoria has Victorianess about her. All right? The form of Victorianess isn't the same as
Cat.
As catness. That doesn't sound too nice, does it? All right? Catness is very different than Victorianess. Okay. Now, the difference between chairness might be the colours of the chairs or the hardness or the softness. All right? All those other things which exist as their own forms. But the form of catness is unique to cat, and the form of Victorianess is unique to Victoria. So therefore, when the body is destroyed, cat's body or Victoria's body, when they eventually die, okay, Victorianess and catness can live on, and actually go, Plato would say, and contemplate the forms. Go to a place of ideals and look at pure redness and pure chairness and pure catness and pure dogness, and maybe even each other. Cat can look at pure Victorianness, at her soul, and marvel in it. That's Plato's ideas. Now, there's problems with this ideas of Plato. Okay, it's clever because you think about your bodies. Like, there's not one particle, not one atom in your body that's in the same place that it was 11 years ago. Even your whole skeletal structure changes. We take in food, and matter and particles all change and go away and come again. Okay, and so the matter isn't what makes us. There's our usness about us. That was Plato's idea. Now, the problem with this, and Aristotle, he was his pupil. Aristotle, great guy. He pointed out, well, look, what is a chair? A chair is something that supports you seated in an upright position. What is red? Red is a colour. Now, an idea can't support you seated in an upright position. So pure chairness can only be found in a chair, in something that does the function of a chair. Red is a colour. It colours things red. An idea can't be being red unless it's actually colouring something red. How do we solve this dilemma? A school of modern philosophy would be that of the phenomenologists, Max Scheler and even Karol Wojtyła to some extent, would say that what we're encountering is true phenomena in this world, and they do exist as a reality apart from this world, and they would follow what St. Augustine said of Plato's idea of the forms, that these things exist as realities, but in the mind of God. Okay. So not just pure chairness and pure redness and pure humanness, okay, but also those other things that we really value above a chair and above a cat and above a dog and above red. Those things like truth, justice, love, human virtue. Those things, those phenomena that we experience in this world, exist in their purest forms in the mind of God. Now, what we experience in this world might be more or less perfect. You might have a more or less perfect chair. You might have a more or less perfect red thing. You think of a knife. What is a knife? A knife is something with a handle which you cut things with, you cut food with. Okay, a really sharp knife is a more perfect knife than a blunt knife. It's more perfect to what it is meant to be. The chair that gives you a bad back is a less perfect chair than the one that gives you a good one. The more perfect human being, we would say, is the one that displays what's unique humanness more perfectly. Okay, the one that displays virtue. Anyway, I'm getting a bit sidetracked because we want to talk about beauty. Okay, so Plato thought that yes, the world was, very similar to our biblical scriptural idea. The world was ordered and beautiful, but yet there was a more perfect beauty beyond the things that are more or less beautiful in this world. Now, some Christian thinkers, and I've already mentioned St. Augustine, but I'm going to also mention specifically Dionysius the Areopagite, as he's often referred to, took up this mantle from Plato, but within a Christian context, spoke about beauty as it relates to God. And Dionysius said, well, yeah, there's this... the universe is... a cascade of beauty. That the things that we see in this world are more or less beautiful, coming from the source of universal existence, being God, and having this cascading down of beauty from the first principle in all things. Okay? He said that the first principle then, because things are more or less beautiful, the first principle, that which we call God, okay, must be that in which there is no distinction between his beauty and his being beautiful. All right. Now, that might be a bit grammatically, it's a bit funny, bit hard to get your head around. But that's just to say that God is his beautifulness. All right. Things in this world can be more or less beautiful. Okay. Chairs can be more or less a perfect chair. Red things can be more or less red. Okay. Things that we take delight in can be more or less true to their nature, can be more or less beautiful. All right. But for them to be able to share in this true phenomena of that which we take delight in, of beauty, there must be that which is essentially beautiful and can't lose its beauty. Because the things that we receive or enjoy as beautiful may one day not be beautiful, or at one stage were not beautiful. Therefore, they don't have beauty of their essence. It's not essential that they be beautiful. It's not just like it's not essential that the jumper be red, or essential that the book be red, or essential that the box be red. So therefore, red is not of its essence. So anything that was at one stage not beautiful or can lose its beauty is not essentially beautiful. But for anything to be beautiful, there must be that which has beauty of its essence, is essentially beautiful, and that's what we call God. Now, St. Augustine would agree with all this. St. Augustine would make a further point. All right? He would say that everything that exists or is experienced as beauty, okay, must have its source in a first principle that is apart from this moving, changing world. Now, an example of this, music. Music is the clearest example of this, because in music, all right, every piece of music ever written, every piece of music composed, okay, before it was written, before it was composed, it was possible that it could be written and could be composed. Do you follow what I'm saying? Okay. So every piece of music in existence, at one stage, every piece of music in actual existence, at one stage was only potentially existing. All right. So in that sense, the musician is actually a lot like the mathematician. Now, you can't make up your own system of maths, but the mathematician goes and discovers principles that exist within reality. So the musician doesn't so much, the composer doesn't so much create as discover that which already potentially exists. Now, we can say the same thing about painting or sculpture or any other form of art. We can even say the same thing about a lovely sunset. You know, it's the way the light's fragmenting through the atmosphere and all of that. But it potentially exists. And so God, as the eternal source of all existence, already has that sustained in his mind. The composer just discovers. Now, if we're saying this though, if we're saying God is essential beauty, beauty itself, unchanging beauty, which imparts beauty on a changing world, then should we assume that everything in this world is beautiful? Should we not experience beauty in everything? And this becomes a question, a dilemma for us. Because as we said at the beginning, there are things that we find more or less beautiful. You know, some of you might find some music beautiful that nobody else even likes. Okay? If the underlying principle of the universe, that is God, is beautiful, then shouldn't we see beauty in everything? And so this brings us on to the topic of the transcendentals. Who's heard that term before? I won't get you to explain it. Okay. We usually speak about the transcendentals in contemporary theology as unity, truth, goodness, and beauty. And beauty is actually the debatable one when it comes to speaking about the transcendentals. What we're saying is that these are the things that transcend everything that exists. Now, you look at an artwork, say you look at that painting there, all right, got a picture of a painting with some, Christian philosophers and theologians there. What can you actually tell about the artist by looking at that painting? What do you think?
Perhaps when he was alive, from like the...
You could make some speculation about the era that it was painted by looking at the styles in a comparative, okay? Maybe you could even do carbon testing on the products that are in the painting. But just by looking at the image itself, somebody else could imitate that style. So you couldn't definitively, you could be on the right track, but you couldn't definitively say something about the artist about when he lived, about looking at that painting. What could you say definitively by looking at that painting?
That it's about a group of philosophers.
You could, if you've given the knowledge that that's what the subject is. Now, you can say something about the subject. You could say, yeah, they're people dressed in funny clothes, okay? Because that's what he's imaged. That's what he's had in his imagination and made an image of, okay? But really, all you can really tell about the artist is that he exists and that he's skilled in shape and form and colour. All right. What, looking at the world, can we tell about the artist, namely God? If we look at every single thing in existence, what definitive things can we say about God by looking at them? Can anyone think of anything?
He creates.
He creates. That's true. And philosophically, we can deduce that he creates out of nothing. In fact, by the fact that we have existence and existing things, and none of them have existence even of their essence. I was saying about red and beauty not being of the essence of things. Everything that we perceive in this world at one stage didn't exist and conceivably won't exist in the future. For anything to exist, there must be that which just is. So he creates out of nothing as that which just is. But the underlining things that we're going to say, well, firstly, if we look at any one thing in the universe, the first thing that we can say about it is that it is a thing. Okay, that's what everything has in common. Everything has in common that it is a thing. Okay, so it has a certain unity about it. Here is my hand. My hand is made up of skin and bones and fingers, okay? But they all come together to form a particular unity. Now, some of the things within that unity might be its own unity. My finger itself might be a unity of its own, and it's made up of skin and bones and nail and whatever else. But anything that is a thing has a certain wholeness, a oneness about it, which must come, therefore, because everything has oneness, from the initial oneness. It might be made up of parts, and those parts, them things themselves might be a thing. Okay, and if we can discern them as a part, then they are a thing in itself. But each thing has a particular unity about it. Now, if everything has a unity about it, if everything that's a thing is a thing, because that's all we're saying. As I was saying, we're going to be doing some deep philosophical ideas, but they're really just simple things. If everything that's a thing is a thing, then it is also that it's a nameable thing. Okay? In other words, it's given towards truth. We can say something about it. Can you imagine something that you can't conceptualize or say something about? No. By the sheer fact that you can imagine it, you can give it a name. You can conceptualize it. You can say something about it. So everything that's a thing that has a particular unity has something that we can say about it. We can name it. We might say wordable. It's intelligible. We can intellectualize it. If we can say something about it, then we can observe something about it. And if we can observe something about it, then it's a small further step to say that it is given to goodness. We can see what it is good for. Okay, and as my picture of goodness up there, I've put oysters, white wine, Cooper's Pale Ale. All right, but also a nice view. You know, these things are all good for particular reasons. I can name them. I can know something about them. Knowing something about them, I can recognise they're good and see that they are an object of my desire, an object worth acting towards. Or if I see the goodness of something else that might be not have an interest for me per se, I can see that it's good for somebody else. Okay, I can see what it's good for. Now, this is the point. Okay, this relates, of course, to that initial creation account we have in the start of the book of Genesis. You know, God creates a world which he can name things, a nameable world, and see that it is good. And we get this sense of even God taking delight in the work of his hands. Now, if I know the truth of something and I know what it's good for, all right, this might be an intellectual movement. This might be work. You know, I was speaking to you about science earlier, and you were talking about what biology and things. You know, and you can look at the way things work, and you can see what they're good for and how they work. But then from that, without any sort of movement of the mind, any cognition happening, there is this intuitive taking delight. And so recognizing the goodness of the truth or something leads to beauty. Okay? That intuitive taking delight in the goodness of the truth of things. Now, if it's the case, then, that everything that's true has something good about it, then is it the case that everything is beautiful? And I would argue that yes, everything that actually is more or less beautiful. Now, can a thing be more or less true? No? What do you mean? Why would you say that?
I don't really engage with this on a philosophical level, but you can't be more or less true. Something can only be true or not true, surely. Like, if the essence of something is its truth, the only thing that cannot be true about it is not of it, and therefore is not true.
Okay. Obviously, something can't be a lie per se. You can hold in your mind something which isn't true, but it's a lie per se. Okay, but when it comes to what a thing is, you know, is the blunt knife true to knifeness? Okay, it's just not very good at it. Well, we're using the terminology in somewhat different, you know, in somewhat vague sense. Okay. Is the broken down car true to its carness? Is the blunt knife true to its knifeness? Is this colour true to redness? Okay. Things can be more or less true to what they're meant to be. Okay. But that doesn't change, as you were saying, that doesn't change the reality. Okay, the reality is of it being true. Now, things like that, in a likewise sense, true here is being very interchangeable with goodness. Because we would agree that the blunt knife isn't a good knife. Or that jumper doesn't stand for a good redness, although it is a good burgundy brown, whatever you want to call it. Okay.
With your move from goodness to beauty, if you recognize the good in something, now I'm assuming from the definition you gave of beauty, it must give you some sort of delight, which would be a positive thing. But if you see the good in something as being good for something not positive, then how can you find beauty in that thing?
Can you find beauty in something that is not positive? Okay. Can you see that? Can you say that there now nuclear fusion energy? It's so clean, it's efficient, it can power homes. We can see a beauty in that. Nuclear fusion energy used as a bomb to destroy people. You know, that is an ugly thing. There is a disintegration of what it is actually good for. And that is ugliness. So, what things are what are more or less beautiful? How am I going for time? Sorry, should I? Okay, I'll try. I'll hurry along a bit, but I'm never very good at timing these things. What we say about what makes something beautiful is that it has, and this definition sort of comes through the work of Dionysius the Areopagite, was articulated by Thomas Aquinas, has proportion, integrity, and claritas. Okay. What does that mean? Well, proportion. Okay, that it's well ordered. If I take a piece of paper, okay, see my piece of paper here, right? If I slice a bit off of one edge, would it look right? No. Now, is that just social conditioning because you're used to this size paper, or is there something else about it? Now, the thing is, if I take this paper and I halve it, it also seems to look right. In fact, it has the same proportions. It's a different size, but it has the same proportions. That's because the short edge times the square root of 2 equals the long edge. And then if I halve that, then the new short, then it's the same proportions again because of the way the square root of 2 is halvable. Okay? Now, the square root of 2, of course, is an indefinite number which doesn't exist in reality. So the piece of paper is just as close as it can be to this mathematical proportion. Now, this mathematical proportion looks right to us, and it's not just pieces of paper that we use it in. All right? If you look at ancient facades of buildings, they have this proportion. If you look at ancient picture frames, they have that proportion. Why? Did these ancient people go and measure up and times it by the square root of 2? No, they just created it that way because it looked right. Now, musicians, all right, apart from you two, who else here plays a musical instrument? What do you play? I'm an organist. You're an organist. All right, we've got an organist, we've got a guitarist. Any other string instruments here? What do you play? Oh, guitar, another guitarist. What is when you learn the guitar? What's the first thing you learn?
The E minor chord.
What's a chord? Well, you said the E minor chord, okay. But you learn your chords. What is a chord? Can you describe a chord for us?
A series of notes put together to make a full sound.
Cool, that is a good definition. Series of notes put together to make a full sound. When you learn to play the organ, what's the first thing you learn?
Scales.
Scales. What's a scale?
A collection of notes where there is a certain order by which you've got to play them, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Collection of notes by a certain order which you play them. You're a guitarist. Did you learn scales as well?
No.
You didn't learn scales?
I'm not very good.
Okay. Scales, though? Yeah. Okay. Now, there were a collection... How did you say it again? A collection of notes, your chord, which make a full sound. Those notes... Can you make up your own chords? You try? What would it sound like?
Sometimes good, sometimes.
Okay, interesting. We can actually do science, okay, and look at sound wave patterns and see why chords work. See how that the vibrations fit together and then they make a thing in your ears and they sound right. Now, is that how chords were discovered? No. You have certain keys you can play on an organ and a piano that match together, okay, with the which plucks the strings at the back or whatever, plucks them in a harpsichord, hits them with a hammer in a piano. You can have a whole bunch of notes that you play together by holding down different strings on a violin and then together, okay, ring also with your guitar. Now, these notes that fit together to make this chord, nobody went and did the science and worked out what sound waves were going to go together. All right? But that is an objective reality that existed within the world of sound, in the universe that we lived in. But people discovered them just by simply playing them and seeing what sounded right. Okay. Likewise, for the use of the proportions in mathematics. Okay. You do a Google search and you find images like this, famous painting like Mona Lisa, and people are like, oh, look at the mathematical proportions, how they all fit in. Now, did Leonardo da Vinci sit there with a compass and a ruler and do all these underdrawings? No. He just painted something that looked right. And it so happens that the mathematical proportions fit in, just like the chord. Okay. Now, the scale's an interesting thing, because when it comes to music, we're not just dealing with single notes, single instances, but we're dealing with a linear procession. Okay? A linear procession which starts off at a certain point and has completion. Has anybody studied composition here? Music composition? Yeah. What happens? How does the scale fit into a composition?
It just does.
It just does. All right. If the music sounds right, then you have a completion to your scales. It's an interesting point. Okay. It comes to an end. And it feels right. It sounds right. It brings delight. And this is fascinating. Now, in music composition, what they do is deliberately hold off the completion of a scale to create some sort of tension. But then when you get to the end of the tension, then there's release, there's catharsis, because it's right. And you get a satisfaction out of it. That's why when the first time, you think of your favourite songs, the first time you hear them, you often didn't get them. Unless you were really concentrating, you didn't really get it. But it's only after later, when you've got to know it, that you know how the tension is going to be resolved. That you can anticipate the catharsis, that you can anticipate the completion, and you can love the piece of music even during the tension. It's a wonderful, fascinating thing. Now, as well as proportion, though, we have integrity. So the thing that has a wholeness about it, the philosophers would say. What is ugly is a lack of integrity, something that's damaged. You can think of the example of a one-armed man. Okay, that's the classical example that's given by the philosophers. You see somebody with one arm, sometimes you can't help staring, it just doesn't look right. Okay? Can a one-armed man be beautiful? Yes, of course he can. He can be a beautiful person, but he can even be even more beautiful in spite of his deformity, in the way he overcomes that. Okay? But the actual missing of one arm is of itself not beautiful. Who he would want to have an arm lopped off to give greater shape or balance? Nobody. Okay? So we have this case whereby we have the one-armed person. Sorry, do you know somebody with one arm or something? No. Yeah, okay. The one-armed person can be all the more beautiful because of their deformity, because of the thing that mars them and makes them ugly. Now, you think about your favourite piece of music. Okay. Often, when an instrument is first introduced into the rhythmic process of the music, the note sounds bung. It sounds off. Okay. It's only later that it harmonises into the music and you get completion. In fact, the introduction of an instrument can cause a tension, or an introduction of a pattern of notes can cause a tension, which then weave into the harmony. There's any Tolkien fans here? All right. Have you read the Silmarillion? Yes. Okay. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes. Okay. Do you want to describe it for us or not?
I got it. So the story in the Silmarillion is that the world was created by singing, by a number of different beings singing together, and each strand of which created different things within the world.
Now, what happens is within the story, though, that's all right, is that you've got this harmony of music that's being created, and then you've got like this demon figure throwing in bung notes to displace it and mess it up. But as the bung notes come in, then the creator figure just weaves them in and adds more of them and harmonises more of it and then adds to its beauty. This is a fascinating concept, because this is like our experience of music. Now, I've got to hurry up here, but The other point, clarity. Why are things more or less beautiful? Why do we experience different things as beautiful? Well, beauty itself is, beauty, it's true. In a certain sense, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Beauty is something experienced. It's experiential. For it to be experienced, it needs to be communicated to us. What's in the eye of the beholder is something outside of the eye. So it needs to have a shining out, a clarity. Now, in the case of music, this is the sound, the way it travels. In the case of things that we see visually, this is the things that we visualize. In the case of biology, okay, the clarity is brought to you through a lot of hard work and a lot of study. Okay? And I've got this example up here. Manure, compost. To most of us, it's dirty, it's disgusting. But to the gardener who knows how rich and good it is, it's beautiful. Because he knows the truth of what it's good for. He's experienced it, so he has a claritas, but that instinctively, when he smells the richness of it, he knows what it is good for. Okay? Think of the most beautiful person you can think of. Everybody, tell the person next to you who it is.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Tell us anyway, who's the most beautiful person you can think of?
Can't name it off the top of my head. Come on, I'm going to work through the emotions. I don't know. Some hot girl. I can't think of it off the top of the head.
Okay. Who have you got?
I don't know.
Who can tell you off the top of their head?
The most beautiful person they can think of. Who can tell me off the top of their head the most beautiful person they can think of?
Unless they're married. Come on. You married?
Who have you got?
My friend Evie.
Your friend Evie. What's so beautiful about Evie? What's so beautiful about Evie?
She's just got a very big heart. She's very generous.
Very big heart, very generous. All right. Who here thinks of their mum?
It's define beauty.
Dude, I've just been spending an hour defining beauty.
As beautiful in the...
Yeah. Who actually did think of their mum or their grandmother? Thank you. Thanks for your honesty. That's great. It's never surprising how many, when you say who's the most beautiful person they can think of, and people think, well, yeah, my mum, my grandma. Now, why would you think of your mum or your grandma and not somebody else's mum or somebody else's grandma? Okay? Because you have experienced the poetry of their life. You have a claritas about them that you don't have about anybody else. You've seen their self-sacrifice. You've seen the way that they overcome the adversity in their lives and weave it with their human virtue into something good. They are like an awesome piece of music for you. That was my question.
You're going to say your best friend's mum, but like your mum's the most beautiful.
Yeah. Look, if you're asked a question, you're not going to say that. Now, it is possible that you can see that you've had an experience with your best friend's mum, which is over and above your own, undoubtedly. It'd be weird to say it. You're right. It'd be weird to say it. But, the thing is, and I asked that question, and some of you might think, yeah, a hot girl or something like that. And others might think, and would think, naturally their mum. But what is the more truer form of beauty? Obviously... Imagine, you're walking down the street and you see two people, they're both the opposite sex to you, and one of them just strikes you as amazingly lovely, okay, and the other one you don't take much notice of at all. But then you suddenly run into them at the pub later, they happen to be at, Theology in the pub or something, and you get to know them, and you realise that the one that you didn't take much notice of at all, has gone through these great struggles and things in their lives, and has overcome all these things, and as you get to know them more, you realise that they are so much more beautiful than superficial beauty, okay? That's not an unusual experience. Now, that's not to downplay the loveliness of somebody who is physically formed and proportioned. There is a true transcendental beauty about somebody who's physically formed and proportioned. But there is some greater human loveliness in our freedom in the person who is able to make their world one of beauty and transform the world. Now, I'm running out of time, am I? I was going to get Christological on you, but I'll hold that off. It might come, maybe some stuff will come up in questions.
All right, thank you, Chris Wolter. Round of applause. All right, so awesome. So we're running a little bit short on time. So rather than doing what we usually do, which is get everyone to go have a drink, a chat, and then come back for questions, we're just going to go straight into Q&As. So we got only a little bit while, so we'll probably just go for about 3 questions. So just chuck your hands up and I'll take the mic to you. Has anyone got any questions? All right, one at the back.
Why would you say beauty has to exist in a ideally perfect form when things can be, you can comprehend something that doesn't exist based on what's around you in an imperfect ideal? Like, things can exist outside of their ideals in a concept.
Yeah, I think you've kind of already answered it. You've said you can comprehend things that exist or don't exist based upon imperfect ideals. So what the philosophical argument is going is that what is the measure by which there are these imperfect ideals? You know, the fact that you would even say that they're imperfect or see them as imperfect means that there must be some measure and standard of what is actually perfect. And so it can only exist...
You say it exists as outside of an ideal?
Yeah. Now, I don't know if we're defining it. Can you try and define ideal?
Perfectness. You said perfectness has to exist for us to realise what imperfection is.
Now, when we're talking about imperfect things, we're often going to say more or less imperfect in relation to what the thing is. So again, I'd use the easy analogy would be a knife. You know, a blunt knife is an imperfect knife. Okay. Now, what it is more or less perfect at is doing what it's meant to do. Okay, it's meant to be of the nature of a thing that cuts. Now, eventually, any knife, you can keep sharpening it, but you can't keep sharpening it forever. It's eventually going to run out of blade if you kept sharpening it. Okay, so it cannot have the perfection of knifeness about it. Yet we do have this notion of it being perfect to what its own being is, what its own existence is. So the first thing that we're going to say about anything that is, of course, is that it has existence, as I started off saying. So if it has existence, then it's going to be more or less perfect to its act of existing. But yet all the material things that we see around us don't essentially exist. They're not perfect in their act of existing as what they're even meant to be, whether they're meant to be a knife, a human being, or a thing that makes you happy as an abstract concept. So therefore there must be that which just is, which is existence of itself and has perfection about it. And that's the thing that we call God. In the sense of beauty, then, we're talking about it in relation to it being able to afford us delight, to give us delight. Okay, and we see that, we observe all the things around us. There are things that more or less give us delight, but even your favourite piece of music you'll get sick of eventually. Okay, it's unable to satisfy. Moreover, your favourite piece of music can't satisfy your hunger for food or your hunger for your own personal greatness, and so it's ultimately unsatisfactory. Does that answer your question?
Chris, I'm just curious. Some of the, I'm just thinking in terms of photography and sort of visual ideas of beauty. I'm just thinking some of the most beautiful images that we think of as humans, they sort of are horrifically beautiful. I'm thinking like the Vietnam War pictures, or the firemen in 9/11, or yep, that's the one. Oh, I didn't realize you had that. Can you describe how we go from beautiful to horrific, or it straddles that line? How that works?
Often in music and poetry, we use the term melancholic. and we talk about a melancholic beauty that something might have in its difficulty, in its ugliness, almost. Okay, and we can see, and I had this picture, this image up as an example of something that is really disordered, really ugly, really horrid, something which lacks all the integrity and goodness that should be there. But yet we have this notion, and particularly this comes through in our theology, of hope. Okay? And hope exists in a natural level apart from any such notion of theological hope. But hope also exists more profoundly when we see it in the context of that we believe in God's providence, that God is ultimately in control, that God ultimately rewards our virtue and weaves us into the beauty of Jesus Christ. Okay? Now that theological hope, that is like what I was talking about before when we talked about music, and you've got the tension within the music, but you know how the music's going to end, and you can anticipate it, and you can love it. And as the tension's building up within the music, you're loving the end, even though you haven't got to the end yet. And that's what you love about the music. Well, that's the same as theological hope. We can be faced with adversity in life, but trusting in God's providence, trusting in our future glorification, okay, we can actually be as brave as the martyr in the face of adversity because we can already anticipate the end. Yeah, does that answer the question? Thank you.
I think that's all we got time for. Round of applause again for Chris Wolter. Thanks, Chris. Thanks heaps.